Hello and welcome to the latest in this series of Smart Transport webinars. My name is Stephen Briers. I chair the Smart Transport programme and I'm chairing this webinar session, which is on making clean air solutions work. For those who don't know us, Smart Transport is a programme brought together by Bauer Media, and it brings together leading people from the public and private sectors to look for solutions to transport problems across the UK, but drawing on international experience too. Obviously, we've created these webinars so as to bring to you the content that was going to be in the 17th of March Smart Transport conference. Hopefully we'll be back with another a conference in Manchester in October. There'll be more detail about that. Smart Transport has a number of outputs. It has a journal that members get. It also now has a website, a weekly newsletter, and will soon have a broader Smart Transport network of a wide range of different groups. What you'll hear today are a set of presentations about aspects of clean air. Obviously, people will have noticed that with COVID-19, the air, particularly in cities, hasn't been cleaner for many years. And I think there's a lot of discussion going on. I certainly see a lot of it on social media about how we keep those benefits after lockdown eases. Around the world, we're seeing cities take road space away from cars temporarily, or in some cases looking permanently, and we're seeing major world cities, New York and Paris, and smaller places like Oakland in California, and also cities in other countries. Bogota has been doing this, in which we've seen a determination to give pedestrians and cyclists more space, to allow for social distancing now during the lockdown, but also with a sense of changing the nature of cities and retaining the clean air benefits that they've had with the lockdown. So I think that gives point to the discussion we've got today. You'll have presentations from three panelists, from Dolly Oladini from the C40 Cities group. She'll explain what that is, but it's a network of world cities. She's the Air Quality Network Manager there. From Mark Dickens, who's the Fleet Director of Groupe Renault in the UK. And Matt Dale, who's the Head of Consultancy for ALD Automotive, who will describe the kind of things that the companies he works with are doing to promote cleaner air. After that, there'll be a Q&A session. People are welcome to submit questions, and then at the end, I'll pick some of them out and put them to the panelists. So I hope people enjoy this. And what I'd now like to do is to ask Dolly to make her presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, can you all see my screen? I'm going to make this to presentation view. Okay, can you see that fully?
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stephen. So good morning and hello everyone. My name is Dolly Oladini and I am C40's Air Quality Network Manager. And today I'm going to share how C40 drives urban climate action through city-to-city sharing. So I'll briefly share the structure and the benefits of this model. And I'll also share some international best practice examples of air quality and climate solutions that our cities are taking. So I'm sure most of you know what C40 sets out to achieve, but for the sake of clarity, we are a network of the world's megacities that are working together to tackle air pollution, climate change, and create healthier cities. Our current chair is the Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, And our main focus for 2020 is to support our cities to deliver air quality, integrated air quality and climate action plans. And this is in recognition of the fact that the 2020s will be a make or break decade for the survival of our environment and the strength of our economy. And I think it's really helpful to share some of the work that we're doing at the moment to support our cities with COVID response and recovery. So we are mobilising our city networks and bringing together our global mayors to share best practices, knowledge and solutions for how we can create healthier and more resilient cities post-lockdown. So why do we work with cities? 55% of the world's population live within urban areas, and as we all know, this is expected to increase to 68% by 2050, and we will see rapid urbanisation within the low and middle income countries. Cities are also the locations of high pollution exposures, and they are also the settings of extreme disparities in wealth, health, and exposure to the vulnerabilities to the effects of air quality and climate change. And as we've all seen in several press releases and news articles, COVID is very much compounding these existing disparities and inequalities, primarily within our urban areas. Cities also represent 70% of global CO2 emissions and 85% of GDP. And by managing urbanisation through low carbon strategies, we can really produce benefits for both the environment, public health, and climate. So cities are very much well positioned to deliver ambitious and impactful air quality and climate action. Delivering urban air quality and climate action at the scale necessary to avoid climate breakdown and adapt to climate impacts requires global collaboration. Every urban solution, from buying electric buses to building retrofits to enhancing flood protection, is political, it's multifaceted, and demands collaboration with city departments, citizens, businesses, and other levels of government to succeed. Therefore, collaboration within cities is absolutely essential to deliver air quality and climate action. However, we must recognise that collaboration amongst cities provides a massive opportunity to accelerate air quality and climate action on both a local and global scale. So C40 cities are working towards a shared goal, and they share a common target, which is to meet a 1.5 pathway by 2050 and ensure the resilience of their city and citizens to air quality and climate impacts. This shared goal, the complexity of the climate process, the climate action process, and our city's willingness to collaborate makes city-to-city networks an ideal mechanism for delivering and accelerating urban action. So collaboration between cities, it helps them to avoid mistakes, it helps them to leapfrog their ideas and share best practices. And as I mentioned, we achieve this through collaborating within C40's networks. We operate more than 17 networks that facilitate our city-to-city exchanges, such as the Air Quality Network, which I manage. Our networks are sectoral, and we bring together officials at a technical level from different cities that are working on a similar action and have a shared purpose. It is important to mention that our networks are city-only working groups, and this creates a safe, honest space for our cities to be honest with their knowledge and their experience, and this ensures that we are cultivating trusted relationships. So we believe that our networks are successful as no provider of technical assistance to a city can, one, reflect the same understanding of policymaking or politics as city peers. And secondly, we believe that they are successful because no provider of technical assistance can provide the variety of experience and knowledge at all stages of the policy development and implementation process that can be gained from city peers. All this is given for free, and that is because every city in the networks gain individual and collective benefit from this process. The network managers, including myself, we connect the right cities with one another, and we design the work programme of our respective networks to help as many cities as possible maximise their air quality and climate action delivery. So there are many benefits of the city-to-city sharing model. Firstly, and obviously, it benefits the individual cities. It helps them to cut costs when delivering action, It helps them to provide peer pressure, inspiration, and create healthy competition between the cities. The networks showcase the city successes and their commitment to take action, and the networks build capacity and long-term resources within our cities. Secondly, the networks benefit the entire group. So within the network, we see the information that the cities share raise ambition for all the cities. It offers diverse thinking, so we're not communicating within echo chambers, and it breaks down common barriers and common challenges that the cities experience. And for all cities, irrespective of which network they're engaged in, we see the networks shift markets and global standards, and it helps to influence other levels of government. So we see some really exciting and interesting advocacy work from our cities at both a regional and state level. So now I'm going to share some specific impacts and outcomes of this city-to-city model. So as I mentioned earlier, the networks bring cities together at a technical level, and we have leveraged the city's collective action within our networks to now deliver these declarations at a political level. And these really raise ambition, shift markets, and set global leadership standards. We kicked off in 2017 with our Green and Healthy Streets Declaration, in which 35 mayors have now pledged to procure only zero-emission buses from 2025, and to ensure that a major area of their city is zero-emission by 2030. The Clean Air Cities Declaration was launched in a joint effort by my team, the Air Quality team, and London, as London is the lead city of the Air Quality Network. And we have 35 mayors committed to setting ambitious reduction targets to meet WHO air quality guidelines and implement new high-impact actions to address the top causes of air pollution by 2025. Okay, so now I'm going to briefly share some international best practices from some of our cities. So firstly, I think it's important to note how cities can apply air quality data and engagement to both target, make the case, implement and evaluate the impacts of action when delivering impactful urban solutions. And I think London is truly an excellent example for how to do this well. So they have used their hyperlocal monitoring from the Breathe London study that they launched a couple of years ago, their political priorities and their commitment from Mayor Khan to raise awareness to drive ambitious policies, such as the ultra low emission zone, which was launched last year. As we all know, this is a very ambitious, stringent emissions-based charging scheme. And several cities across C40 are implementing strong public transport systems. They are increasing walking and cycling, and they are introducing efforts to reduce the number of vehicles and ensuring that the vehicles that are remaining are the cleanest possible. So there are just a few examples here from Curitiba, Istanbul and Chennai, cities that are a model for urban development and are integrating air quality, transportation and land use planning into their overall city plan. Other cities like Paris have eliminated traffic along major corridors like the River Seine, and many more cities like Lima have plans for pedestrianisation and are modelling the benefits of these actions to make a stronger case for new implementation. Several cities within C40 and around the world are increasingly exploring urban vehicle access restrictions, such as London, to incentivise, one, a reduction in vehicle traffic, and two, a shift away from dirty vehicles. And we are increasingly seeing air quality and public health at the centre of these transportation interventions. And there are a few examples here from Singapore, Stockholm, Paris, cities that are disincentivizing or banning polluting vehicles. And several cities are also investing in clean technology, using their city purchasing powers to transition to cleaner vehicles and equipment, such as Portland, that introduced ambitious procurement standards last year for non-road mobile machinery. Shenzhen is an excellent example of a city that has implemented electric buses. So they have the world's largest electric bus fleet. And cities like LA that have an innovative electric car scheme in which they have deployed 100 vehicles within low-income communities. So to summarise C40's air quality strategy and our city's air quality efforts and action, firstly, we support our cities with their air quality management efforts and the assessment of existing data to help them identify priority source sectors to effectively target policies and strategies. We work with them to engage in both regional and national processes, recognising that this supports the alignment policy. We work with them to assess air quality improvements of their policies and evaluating the resulting health effects. We're currently communicating with a few cities that have to comply with the European framework for air quality standards. So how can we mobilise these European cities to lobby for more ambitious emission standards that are in line with the WHO air quality standards? We also communicate with our cities on how they can use their regulatory authority over local sources, planning policies and investments to meet their clean air priorities. And we work with our cities on the alignment of air quality with other important goals. So communicating the equity narrative, how they can align their goals with adaptation and other co-benefits to truly make a strong case for implementing ambitious policy. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very happy to take questions at the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dolly. That was a good presentation. I think one of the starting points for the Smart Transport Network was a sense that this isn't a direction of travel that's going to disappear and fade, and that a lot of private sector companies and the motor industry and elsewhere weren't necessarily aware of this and were kind of in denial about it. So the point of Smart Transport is to bring people together who are committed to working with cities like the ones that Dolly has outlined and ones in the UK to actually make progress on this and to work out what the roadmap is from towards the kind of clean air objectives that cities have. So I'd now like to bring in Mark Dickens from the Renault Group, who will take us through what Renault as a group is doing on clean air. Thanks very much. See the
Today,
screen.
tomorrow and beyond. Excellent. Okay. Right. Well, let's see if we can make this work.
Great.
So, as I said in my welcome earlier, clearly you're not going to get the video, so maybe you can see that afterwards. I'm sure these slides will be a little bit more interesting anyway. So from a manufacturer's perspective, we talked about, or Dolly talked about some of the mega trends that have been referenced. If you've been on any of the other smart transport webinars, you will have seen some of that information. For us, you've seen increasing urbanization, with about 60% of the global population expected to live in urbanized areas by 2030. There's a growing concern about the sustainability of human activity, juxtaposed with an estimated quadrupling of transported goods by 2050, and an economy which is increasing based around shared and on-demand services as younger generations start to consume products and services. The trends currently manifest themselves in the form of congestion, emissions, poor air quality, with the associated impact on public health. At the same time, there's a relatively siloed transport system, which generally lacks flexibility. What I'd like to take you through are the clean air solutions that can work today, what we're testing for tomorrow, and our vision of where this testing will take us in the future. So let's start with personalised transport. So where existing public transport doesn't work for individuals, car sharing schemes are an important step in reducing the total number of vehicles on the road. The primary benefit car sharing has is the evidence that they help reduce the total stock of cars required in an urban area. And it's interesting that for each car sharing scheme, it's estimated that 7 to 15 private cars are no longer required. Even better, there's evidence to suggest they free up between 6 and 14 private car parking spaces. On average, cars are stationary for up to 96% of the time. So the case for making more efficient use of car stock is very strong. average journey types also lend themselves very well to car sharing. As a driver or passenger, cars account for around only 8% of trips under half a mile. But this rises sharply to 76% of all trips between 2 and 3 miles. So it should come as no surprise then that of 32 million cars registered in the UK, 2 of the top 3 models on the road are small hatchbacks, so B segment hatchbacks. Think Renault Clio in size. So obviously, if you increase car sharing, we could expect to see a reduction in the stock of cars required to service an urban area, and with the associated benefits of alleviating congestion and reducing pollutants. The second opportunity is when car sharing companies adopt 100% electric, battery electric vehicles, and then further reduce pollutants in the local area. So many of you may already be using car sharing schemes yourselves. As we're in the capital, as we're based in the capital, I thought I'd highlight 2 initiatives in 2 other capital cities. A car sharing company called Zity, which is owned by Renault and Ferrovial, who also runs Heathrow Airport for interest, have deployed 725 100% electric Renault Zoes into Madrid. And just this month, 500 were made available in Paris, where 20% of the inhabitants use car sharing. So what is a Renault Zoe? I'm not sure everybody would be familiar with the car, but it is a 100% electric B segment hatchback. When we think back to the most popular licensed cars in the UK, 2 of the top 3 were, as I said, B segment hatchbacks. While many manufacturers are launching large or luxury EV models, Renault's at the forefront of democratizing EV technology. So each Zoe on a car sharing scheme saves 2 tons of CO2 emissions per year in a city. EV car sharing is definitely a major opportunity for cities, as demonstrated in Madrid, Copenhagen, Berlin, Moscow, and now Paris. In all these cities, the success is based on a strong cooperation between public authorities, and private companies. We think this is the appropriate model to accelerate the fight against congestion and pollution. Then slightly differently to car sharing are car subscription services. These sit somewhere between leasing and car sharing. They enable users to have a month-to-month car use as they choose. Again, this flexibility helps move us towards more efficient use of car stock available. And in actual fact, during this week's EV Cafe we've been running on LinkedIn, we heard something from the panelists there about their use of car subscription services. There is a trend towards this in the UK, particularly with electric vehicles, because the other benefit of these schemes is that for those who are still cautious about electric, they can run an electric vehicle with no more than a month's financial commitment. Indeed, Renault UK will soon be announcing a deal to supply over 1,000 EVs to its car subscription service in the UK. Groupe Renault are well placed to offer expertise on EVs. We were pioneers of the technology in the UK and Europe, and the group has been manufacturing, selling, maintaining and reselling EVs since 2011. With over 285,000 EVs sold in Europe, I would say we've been successful at it. And for the purposes of today, EVs are the most relevant when discussing solutions for urban air quality. The group also has a range of electrification options coming to market with both hybrid and plug-in hybrid powertrains. So the consumer has a very real choice. We've spoken about how mobility can work for the individual, but what about goods and services and the services that people demand? I think especially in today's era of lockdown, we demand these even more perhaps than we did before. After cars, vans are the next largest category, with over 10% of the registered vehicles in the UK at 4.1 million registered vehicles. Van traffic makes up around 16% of all traffic, and that's up 10% from 1993. So you can see the upward evolution. The most recent annual changes calculated between 2017 and 2018 show van traffic was up nearly a percentage point. Well, that makes van traffic the fastest growing by body type. So to make clean air solutions work, the adoption of EVs by the van market also has to be addressed. Average van miles per year have remained stable since 1994 at around 13,000 miles per year, which equates to just over 50 miles per day working day of the year. So if you're looking at the stats on the screen, this means electric vans on the market today are a viable option for many, although not all of the 4.1 million registered vans. So if we think about tomorrow, I'd just like to share some examples of initiatives that our group is working on. These broadly fall into two sections. First, enhancers for electric vehicles. That's projects which extend the benefits of electric vehicles versus what we see today. And second is autonomous technology to help mobility in many forms. So let's start with the world first. Porto Santo is an island which is part of the autonomous region of Madeira, and it's the world's first smart island. The initiative between Groupe Renault and the Madeiran electricity company started in 2018. It was based around 4 key pillars with the aim of developing models that will allow smart ecosystems to be applied to other islands, regions and cities. So the 4 key pillars were electric vehicles, stationary energy storage, smart charging, and vehicle-to-grid charging. Later, you'll see how pivotal the testing of these technologies has been to our vision of the future. To go into a little more detail on each of these technologies in the case of Porto Santo, the electric vehicles deployed were a fleet of 14 Renault Zoe and 6 Kangoo van ZEs, so car and small van. The stationary energy storage was composed of second life batteries, helping to capture the unpredictable supply of energy from renewables. Smart charging was also used to determine the best time for the vehicles to draw power from the grid, whilst also acting as a store for electricity that the grid can access. Since Porto Santo, the group's invested further in electric vehicle technology. In the area of battery storage, we've invested in a partnership with Mobility House to deliver the largest energy storage system in Europe, and that is made from electric vehicle batteries. And this facilitates very clearly the second life use case of batteries. For vehicle-to-grid charging, we've begun a trial with Renault Zoes fitted with reversible charger within the vehicle to make best use of the existing electric vehicle charging terminals. And a new Smart Island project has been launched on Belle-Île-en-Mer off Brittany's west coast, the southwest coast there, and that develops on the Porto Santo example with the introduction of a car sharing scheme for the community. We've also been working on the future of last mile. Faced with an estimated quadrupling of packages, and actually I'm pretty sure that's escalated even further lately, being delivered by 2050, we're experimenting with a product called EasyFlex. You can see it there on the bottom left of the screen. It's a compact, maneuverable, electric and connected delivery LCV, has a range of 62 miles, and it will collect data on geolocation, mileage, range, use of cargo loading doors, speed, stops, and more data with the aim of better understanding the needs of delivery vehicles for the future. The second area is around autonomous technology in vehicles. And the group's been investing heavily and trialling today to make the EV offering of tomorrow even more compelling. So in June 2019, an exclusive agreement between Groupe Renault, Nissan and Waymo was signed on autonomous mobility services in France and Japan. The Paris region and Groupe Renault will explore the implementation of autonomous mobility service between Charles de Gaulle Airport and La Défense. La Défense is a major business district of Paris, for those that aren't familiar. Between the middle of October and November, throughout Paris-Saclay University campus, around 100 people were using our on-demand service as part of the Paris-Saclay Autonomous Lab project You can see a Zoe there on the screen. And the daytime service using electric, autonomous and shared Renault Zoe cab prototypes allowed people to move freely around the campus. For everyday mobility, such as going to one of the schools or laboratories, heading to lunch, playing sports, etc., etc. So it's clear how the group is investing and trialing in real-world situations today to make the EV offering of tomorrow even more compelling. So the examples I've cited so far in terms of electric, connected and autonomous technology feed into a series of concepts unveiled by Renault. These concepts set out our vision of what clean air solutions could look like in the future. The first in the series of concepts was released in 2018, and it's on the left-hand side of the screen, called EasyGo. The EasyGo concept is a robo vehicle that is it's both a vehicle and a service. It's part of the urban ecosystem, has a positive impact on the city by providing mobility, and it's more respectful of clean air. So it's very much a facilitator for everyday life. EasyGo concept offers a genuinely connected and customized experience to its passengers. Now, if you are watching my video, you'd see a nice little moving image at this point of what that vehicle actually does. But essentially, the front doors of the car facilitate access to allow 6 passengers to enter while standing. Access is made easier for persons with reduced mobility or using push chairs, etc. They benefit from a dedicated installation or an access ramp attached to the EasyGo platform. So really, really easy access to the vehicle. The center one is something called Easy Ultimo. That was the next concept to be unveiled, and it showed what a luxurious electric, connected, autonomous and shareable vehicle could look like. And finally, just recently, for those that have seen this in the press, so we've just launched Morphos. So this car showcases sustainable mobility in the medium term beyond 2025. Now, for those people familiar with Renault and Groupe Renault, you do know that many of our concept cars that we show end up being the reality on the road. Things like in the past, the Renault Scenic, the Renault Capture, very, very close vehicles, and the Zoe to the concept cars very close to the cars that we launch. So with Morphos, this features inductive charging capability, the ability to charge household items when not in use through the vehicle's vehicle-to-grid technology, and level 3 autonomous technology. One of the challenges for manufacturers is how ready vehicle platforms are to accept a completely new powertrain. So Morphos previews the next generation EV platform for Renault to build larger vehicles. The wheels are positioned closer to the corners, which gives you optimal battery positioning. And that opens up new possibilities for aerodynamically efficient and dynamically engaging vehicles in a range of body styles. And to know more about that vehicle, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I think there was an article with some videos about this vehicle, or go to Groupe Renault's LinkedIn pages. So, as I identified earlier, one of the key questions facing the industry is, what does the future of last mile look like? Renault's vision for last mile was unveiled in 2018. As I said earlier, it was named Easy Pro. It's essentially an autonomous delivery concept featuring customizable robopods, and you can see kind of a vision of them there. Again, if I was showing the video, you'd see these in action, and I'll try and post the video later on today because I think it's really, really interesting to see how this operates. It's an autonomous vehicle delivery concept featuring customizable robopods, as I said. The pods feature a field-based human concierge, so effectively a driver come pilot at the front. You can see the front is open there. And it's specialized, so he would effectively command the special deliveries and robopod fleet management. The pods start out their journey at a central hub. They can either travel in convoy, or separate off to travel autonomously to a specified location. The pods then deliver or set up the goods or services on offer. So whilst you can't see it on screen, the vehicle on the right is actually equipped with delivery lockers, and there's also one with a mobile cafe. So they look at the immediate challenges we're facing today as a global society. You can see the attractiveness of a system like this. Delivery into a predefined location autonomously for people to access goods and services. So I'm sorry you couldn't see the video today, because it would have perhaps given you a little bit of a feel of the moving and the real life scenario of some of the concepts and things that I've shown you on the screen. But as I said, hopefully it's given you a clear view of what clean air solutions look like for today, tomorrow and beyond. For today, with the current electric vehicle technology, car sharing presents a very real opportunity to reduce the stock of cars required to service an urban area. But it has to be as part of a blend of transport solutions. In addition, the democratization of electric vehicles is very, very important. We've seen how a B segment hatchback in electric vehicle form looks like in the Zoe car, and also how that facilitates greater access and electric vehicle adoption. The rise of vans as a proportion of registered vehicle stock and total traffic miles covered points to action required in that sector. With average workday mileage of vans at around 50 miles, there is an opportunity for many vans to make the switch with the right incentives. We've seen a change in buying behaviour with company cars, and the benefit kind rate change that's happened right now, for example. For tomorrow, facilitators of electric vehicle technology, be that battery storage, vehicle to grid technology, smart charging and autonomous technology, are being invested in right now. Our pilots and studies will ensure a greater level of connectedness for electric vehicles of the future, enabling greater use of the renewable resources. Beyond, from Groupe Renault's perspective, there is a very bright future. Our concept car and delivery vehicles show what electric, connected, autonomous and shareable vehicles will look like in the future. They draw on the technologies present today, and they will make clean air solutions of the future work even better. So thank you for bearing with the cranky start and keeping with me as I load up the presentation. We'll take questions in the Q&A panel at the end, I believe, but that's all for me for now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. We'll move straight on, if we can, to Matt from ALD. Matt, you need to unmute yourself. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry, slight technical problem there. Apologies for that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Dale. I'm head of consultancy for ALD in the UK. And this morning I'm going to talk to you about breaking down some of the barriers that UK business may be coming across to successfully operate in clean air locations. I'll apologise now for my presentation. I've had to move it from onto a Mac, which has had a little bit of an issue with some of the transitions, so apologies for that. First of all, I want to share some of our global learning and a little bit of background on ALD Automotive. We're a 1.7 million vehicle leasing company operating across the globe. And whilst much of our local sharing focuses on Europe, from an intelligence and consultancy perspective, we have monthly global calls and discuss the different ideas and experiences that we're finding literally across the globe. A little bit of learning from around the world. This actually shows some of the mobility experiences we've created and how we've shared them. So in Italy, we created our own corporate car sharing model, which is now being shared in Germany just about to launch in France and Spain, and will be in the UK next year. The Netherlands are testing a mobility app currently, and if that works, that will then get rolled out across European countries. In the UK, we've been dealing in telematics for some 15 years now, and our new platform is currently being launched in the UK, in Poland and in Mexico, and will be rolled out globally over the next 24 months. Netherlands created a mobility experience centre, which very nice for them. They have lots of space with 19 screens in. Not many of our offices in Europe could cope with that. So we brought one to the UK on a smaller screen version, but we also created a mobile version for the Benelux regions. We're working with mass car sharing in Finland, ride sharing in France, and a product called ALD Switch in Belgium, which has also been rolled out in various countries now as well. So we are understanding and learning from our global business, but we're sharing those thoughts and ideas rather than keeping them to ourselves. So where are the barriers in the UK? Or actually, they're everywhere. There's a lot of barriers, and when I'm discussing this today, I'm putting a corporate spin on it, a corporate view, because as we switch to electric, we understand and we know that actually the corporate businesses of the UK can actually make it go quicker. They can make it really happen. So we've got barriers everywhere, and we've got them everywhere because everybody thinks that their way is best or ahead of the competition. And this is both in the public and the private sector. So there is a real need to collaborate at all levels. We've all got to learn this together because we're all going in the same direction. We're all on the same journey. So if you look at public transport for starters, excluding the rail network, there are so many different operators. So how do we make it simple? Oyster is brilliant, works in London, but it only works in London. And it's really designed for the consumer, not the corporate operator. How does the traditional fleet manager make use of this service? The train is definitely the best way to take long journeys in the majority of cases, but ticketing is complex. And how does a business adopt to this? Currently, they do it through pay and reclaim, which means an individual is paying out for a ticket, then they're claiming it through expenses. Not particularly efficient. And if you're using train for business regularly, it is also a lot of costs that you're taking on board. When we look at the charging infrastructure, it really is a bit of a mess. And in reality, it makes running a battery electric vehicle more difficult for a corporate business. And it really is not just about residents at this point, about the people that live in the areas where the public infrastructure is. We have a customer who is based in London. They only operate within probably half a mile and inwards of the congestion charging zone. And they've switched 50 internal combustion engine vehicles to pure electric, battery electric vehicle BMW i3s. Because of the way they work, they don't take vehicles home. Nobody owns it. It's like a pool car. They have had to work with 5 different public charging network companies in the centre of London to make their business work. But they decided that they were going to make it work because they wanted to switch their fleet to electric. They feel it's the right way to work. So public and private have got to work together. We have to pull together. We've got to apply common sense, and we've got to make it easier to change. But public and public have got to work together as well. It's very important that actually different cities do share the same thoughts and ideas. You can't, we've already seen it with clean air zones where there are different regimes coming into different places. That makes it really difficult for a business to operate. And that can be a business running cars, it can be a business running vans. Anybody that's moving from one place to another, it really does make it complex. And from a corporate viewpoint of thing, we've got to think about how different forms of mobility are taxed as we move forward. If somebody chooses to switch from a company car to a mass package as mass comes, how would an employee and an employer be taxed on this. And this has got to be looked at sooner rather than later, or else businesses running fleets of company cars in particular will find it difficult to change quickly because they'll have no clarity. A company car is a benefit and taxed accordingly for private use. So how would that work for the inclusion of some form of micro-mobility or switching to a mass package? They are things that have to be thought about now. So what's available at the moment? Mark's covered some of these areas, but the solutions that are really available are the car. The car is a here and now, but it really is time for businesses and individuals to shift powertrain. And from a business, you've got to build that into a policy. As I said before, the train, it really does work for those longer journeys, and it reduces congestion, and it is a way more carbon efficient way of running. Local public transport, buses, trams, tube, whatever they may be, they are a mobility solution that's been here a long time. So we've got to start using them. Car share, as in car clubs, and also ride sharing. Again, ride sharing isn't particularly new. People used to ride share all the time because they couldn't afford their own car. Taxis, the smartphone. The smartphone is probably one of the best mobility solutions that we've had appear in our hands over the last few years. And to easily encourage employees to use travel apps is a given, but actually how many businesses proactively tell their employees how to use a smartphone? They give them a smartphone, they learn how to use it. It's not very joined up, but maybe that's partially down to the issue around how these things are taxed and sorted out. Cycling, obviously, but make sure you wear a helmet. And your feet, it'll make you feel better. Carry an umbrella around. The best way to reduce your carbon footprint is to walk places rather than to jump in the car and take the easy option. Now, I've kept this quite short today because we are running out of time one way and another, but I wanted to close with a bit of a case study. I created this case study before COVID-19 struck, and it is reliant on my journey from Bristol to where we would have been in County Hall today. So if I'd have travelled by car, it's 112 miles each way, and Google forecast that as a 2-hour, 27-minute journey, creating 51 grams of CO2. Now, I'm under no illusion that that journey would probably have been a bit more than 2 hours 27. But the cost that I've got on there is including parking, tolls, and fuel. By train, Bristol Parkway to Paddington plus a tube and walk, 1 hour and 57, 20 kilograms of CO2 rather than nearly 52 kilograms in the car. And again, I've included all my parking and my tolls. But if we look at the cost, there's a major difference there. In fact, there's a difference of £152.64. So why would I bother taking the train on that basis, or why would my company encourage me to take the train? Well, it's quite simple, really. I can work on the train, and that's a value to my business. Put my labour time in there, that's going to be £100. I'm doing less miles on my car. 218 miles difference will actually reduce that cost by £23 off my lease, if you like. So the cost of use of vehicle. I've reduced my stress levels. That is absolutely priceless. It gives me more time back into my life. But I reckon probably saving 90 minutes on that journey. I'm walking, I'm being more active. That's priceless. It really is. The savings we make on things like the NHS because we're healthier, we're doing more exercise, it's all a given. There is no sell required on that. So actually reducing congestion is another element. I'm taking my car off the road. I'm going to the station. It's 4 miles from where I live. I could use a taxi to get there, but that's still a vehicle on the road, and actually I can plug my car in and charge it while it's parked up at the station. I've reduced my carbon footprint considerably, more than 50% reduction on my carbon footprint. And I go into London once a week, so that's quite a saving. So all in all, I've saved £29. It's cost £29.64 for me to take the train instead of going by car. I feel better, I'm more active, I've reduced congestion, and I've helped reduce my carbon footprint. So when we're looking at how we move around, actually, whilst we look at an initial cost of something, we've got to look at the whole picture. This is going beyond the total cost of ownership for a vehicle and actually moving more towards a total cost of mobility. And these are the conversations we're having with corporate businesses today around how they need to think differently about their fleet, how actually by reducing those long journeys, by taking public transport, the reduction in the journeys allows them to switch to electric vehicles more quickly because they're not doing those big journeys. Anybody that's sitting in a car for 4 hours on a journey is not productive. So we are looking at the different ways that businesses need to adjust their mobility, but we do need to think about the elements that we have to change within taxation, within making life easier for them to change, because if we do, they will certainly change. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matt, and thanks for the presentations, and thanks to everybody who's stuck with us despite some of the technical issues. Well, look, we've had a good number of questions submitted, and I'm just looking at them now. Can I? I've had there's a very interesting set of things. Is biomethane trams. We'll come back to that. So look, I think that there's a good set of questions here around, well, what's happened with COVID-19? What are we doing with that? What does that mean? Paul Beard and Gary Stansfield have both raised the question of what's the impact of that on things like car sharing and so on. I wondered whether I mean, that's something that perhaps all the panelists might want to pick up on. And then there are a set of questions really about the various aspects of the technology. Gary has also said, what about particulates, which EVs have as well as fossil fuel vehicles, and I think that would be interesting too. Dolly may have views on that. And then there's a set of questions around what you do about other vehicles, minibuses, 40-ton Arctics, and so on. Perhaps I could ask, there's also a question about, does the healthy streets that Dolly mentioned help air quality, and the data on that. So Dolly, could I ask you firstly, what are cities seeing in relation to COVID-19 and the impacts of that? And secondly, other forms, the healthy streets analysis and aspects of other kinds of vehicles, large vehicles, minibuses and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so I'll take the first question on what are cities seeing in terms of the impact COVID is having on air pollution. So we are currently talking to several cities at C40 who are currently conducting analysis on tracking pollution trends as a result of COVID mandated lockdown. And as you can imagine, this work is pretty complex. So we've seen a reduction in NO2 due to a reduction in traffic, but we're not seeing the same result for other pollutants, and that's just due to the complexity of how other pollutants behave. So cities are sharing their research, their methodology for how they've conducted their research, but they're also raising some interesting and important questions around what is the reduction of road traffic, how does that contribute to the overall reduction in air pollution? How do we use this research to understand and better identify the top sources of air pollution in our cities? And how can we use this real world experiment to make the case for implementing policies in the future, but also making a stronger case for retaining some of our existing policies? So, for example, I'm having really interesting conversations with some city officials in Mexico City who are receiving some slight pushback for their existing vehicle restrictions. And that is just due to the complexity of how some of the pollutants are behaving during COVID. So I will be having a call with several cities in a couple of weeks' time to understand how can we work collectively to use this data and use our engagement for case making for green recovery measures and reducing existing inequalities. In terms of the Healthy Streets analysis, so I know that my colleague Anna Paris is on the line. She works on the Green and Healthy Streets Declaration, so she might be best placed to give some insight into some of the analysis, the data, the outcomes that have been produced from the Green and Healthy Streets work. I don't know if Anna, if you can turn your audio on.
I don't think Anna can join because she's not counted as a panelist, but if you could put you can post her email afterwards, that would be great.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. Yes, and I think it's also helpful to hear. So I actually, just before this conference today, I was having a conversation with a few European cities that, as you all would have heard, have had to suspend their road charging schemes during COVID. And how are they planning to reinstate these schemes when we emerge from the crisis, so during recovery, and trying to balance improving air quality with economic recovery? So there's some really interesting knowledge and insight that was shared on that call. How do we ensure that we don't see an increase in car use post-lockdown? What is C40's role in that? And as it was mentioned earlier, we're seeing some ambitious and exciting work from some of our cities like Paris, Milan, Rome, New York, and we're trying to have these cities at C40 share their ambitious plans and their proposals to inspire other cities to take similar action, so we don't see an increase in car use as we emerge from COVID. Oh, Stephen, I think you're on mute. I personally can't hear you.
Sorry, thanks very much. Sorry, it's I just have to remember to do that. Can I ask, there's been a set of questions about the different technologies. So Mark, can I come to you? There's a set of questions that have come to you about EV minibuses, about 40-ton lorries, whether battery, hydrogen, catenary type things, and also perhaps a more provocative question about whether the OEMs are behind Tesla on autonomous and electric vehicles and what that means. Do you want to pick those up?
Yeah, I think I just want to go back actually as well to the COVID-19 point because we've got a couple of points really. I think we've seen over because this is right here and now, that's the bit we've got to deal with. Over the last few weeks, there's been quite a significant increase in website traffic for people searching for cheap used cars. And we're talking between the £1,000 and the £2,000 bracket. So these cars are not going to be modern, fuel-efficient engines. And that's something we really need to be mindful of. So when we talk about people wanting to get back and drive on the roads, some of the, with an increase in older car purchases, we're going to have a bit of a problem to deal with. Car sharing is certainly one way to deal with it. But our partners would really need to make sure that that the cars are hygienic for everybody's use, and people are going to jump to things like car sharing and take EVs because I think people will want to maintain this clean air environment that we've kind of created at the flick of a switch. We don't, unfortunately, we don't make trucks, so I can't come back to the heavy truck and the hydrogen point. That's not really a question for me. But the one thing I would say is that on LCVs, we are exploring hydrogen. So we're working with customers and on the future of that. There's a number of different projects on the go at the moment. There was a question about particulate matter, I think you mentioned as well. You mentioned about particulate matter. I mean, most particulate matter comes from exhaust emissions. That's where the majority of it comes from. Then you've got tyre wear, linear performance, low rolling road resistance, etc. So I think, and the third is brake wear. Now, if you look to the modern electric vehicle, most vehicles now are being designed with braking technology where you don't need to use the brakes. The engine is used for braking and regeneration of the electric battery to do that. So I think we are, as I say, we're talking about modern vehicles and how that affects the air quality. But one of the issues we do have to think about and have to deal with is, what about all the old vehicles that are on the road? How do we get people to transfer from old technology and the absolute escalation we've seen in people wanting to buy between £1,000 and £2,000 cars in a used car environment right now? So that's the thing we need to do. As I mentioned in my presentation, we talked about a democratization of electric vehicles, so making something that is modern, attractive, has all the tech that everybody requires, but at a very affordable price. You mentioned about, I think the question was, are we behind Tesla? I'm not sure about being behind Tesla. We've been making electric vehicles now for nearly a decade. So, and I think you've heard me say the phrase before, the point is not necessarily about selling a vehicle, it's about the experience you gain over selling and dealing with vehicles over that 10-year period. One of the points was with our dealer networks, we don't have a specialist electric vehicle network for maintaining vehicles or selling vehicles. Every single dealer can do it, and they're all equipped to do it, and they're all accredited to do it. That's quite important, so that everybody has access to professional expertise. The key point in over those 10 years as well is that over that time, so we're Europe's #1 in volume in terms of electric vehicles. However, what I would say is Tesla are a fantastic team, and we know some of the guys there. They are fantastic. They are pretty much a luxury item, though. There's a big difference between trying to buy a Tesla and a Renault. So I think, but the key point was we need to make, all of us need to make electric vehicles affordable to the mass, not just the accessible to those that can afford high luxury items.
Yes, somebody was asking about the typical price for the vehicles that were shown in the presentation.
Which ones? Cars. Well, I think
cars. I think, yeah.
Yeah. So generally, electric vehicles, so small B segment hatchbacks, you see in the market on business lease for around £200 a month. It very much depends on a user's environment. So I could talk about Renault. It is around, I think it starts around between £180 and £200 a month. Again, depending on the profile. High mileage, when I say to high mileage, you know, these electric vehicles now do well in excess of 250-mile range. So if you're in a real world environment, so if you're talking about high mileage users doing 10, 20,000 miles a year, then it's between 250 to £300 a month. It really depends on the profile. Key point is, if the car is empty, and there aren't many electric vehicles that you see empty sat on the side of a road waiting to be picked up, because as I mentioned earlier about the braking, they're built with regenerative technology now. If it was empty, it costs you £4 to fill up an EV. You know, in fact, not even that. And I say I've not actually, have one in the family myself, we've never actually had to fill it up, for want of a better word. But if it was empty, it's £4 to fill it up overnight. You know, it's a lot less the total cost of ownership is a lot lower. They don't need to be serviced as much. There's less moving items. As I said, very often you don't need to use the brakes as much. So it's quite hard to put an actual cost, but the cost benefit is enormous.
Thank you. Matt, a set of questions for you. Do you want to pick up the car sharing point? Are people going to be less prepared to share cars at the moment, given COVID and so on? And do you have, somebody's asking for more data on this kind of thing, and also about more rural areas. Do you want to pick up any of those?
Sure, I will just touch on what Mark was just saying then around TCO. It is extremely important that people understand when they're looking at an electric vehicle, not to just look at the cost of the vehicle up front. When you're looking at fueling it, it's a third of the cost. The downtime is negligible. Electric vehicles don't need servicing, less brake wear, less everything wear sort of thing. So if you're thinking about an electric car and seeing the price being very expensive, think about the residual value in the future, think about the running costs of it, think about the servicing costs of it, because they will be very, very much reduced from an internal combustion engine vehicle. Going back to the point around car share and ride sharing, it's a really good point. And as I said, I wrote my presentation before COVID-19 arrived with us. But I think with all mass transit, we have to apply common sense. If, as Mark says, the trend is that people want to buy cheap cars, that is very frightening. If we can somehow find our way around this new world and use mass transit car share in a different way. If you look at car share, for example, okay, we know how this is transmitted. It's very easy on a handover, i.e. you've finished the car share, you've parked the vehicle back up. Okay, let's wipe it down. Let's just wipe down the areas that you used and the next person does the same. It's just another process to add in there. Maybe that's a little bit simplified. We go shopping, we go to Tesco, pick something up, put it down, we don't necessarily buy it. We get a trolley, we wipe the handle down before we use it now. So I think it doesn't need to really push back all of these elements that are happening. There's a responsibility on business to become flexible in the way that it allows people to travel. So maybe there's an element there that says, yes, I go to work on the train, but actually I'm starting an hour earlier, I'm starting an hour later. We're flattening out that element of peak travel time, and maybe bringing in the things like micromobility and legalizing electric scooters more quickly to get people using them. There's just so many different things we can use here, but I think car share is here to stay, ride share is here to stay. We have a period of time where we have to be cautious and careful, but what we mustn't do is panic. Very easy to say when you're sitting working from home, but I think we have to be sensible in the way we apply ourselves and actually find ways around this, and find different ways of thinking with those services that are available and are growing.
Thanks. We're nearly out of time. I hope people have found this interesting. I've tried to pick up as many of the questions as I can. Just a few ones we didn't quite pick up. There's a set of questions that have come up. On somebody, Asif from asked about finance for clean air solutions. What I suggest is you might want to look at one of the next webinars, which is specifically looking at financing smart transport solutions. That's coming up in a few weeks. And there's the data on car sharing that Anna Maloney asked about. I think if you look at Como UK's website, they've got quite a lot of data there about car sharing and what people who car share do typically. Shetland Islands Council asked about rural solutions. We did a webinar on Tuesday on on COVID-19 responses outside cities, and there were some interesting ones there. And I put a link on the question to Jenny Milne, who's piloting some of the stuff in the Highlands, who might be worth talking to. So I think we've answered, we couldn't answer James Trotter's question about payment systems and air quality, because I don't think anybody knows the answer to that, particularly on this call. You've heard Matt make a plea for common standards on charging, and I think that's a core question here. I think we better finish there. I spot people from the attendees sort of melting away. I hope people have found this webinar interesting and useful for them. I hope some of you at any rate have had your questions answered. Apologies again for some of the technical problems somewhere in this. I think we might, by trying to play a video, we might have stretched the technology capability of this platform a little bit further than we perhaps we're able to, but we'll learn from that and for future webinars. If you look on the website, you'll see the next ones on, as I've said, finance and decarbonisation, and hopefully people can join those and other smart transport events as we plan them and keep in touch. I'd like to thank Dolly, Matt and Mark for their presentations, Jeremy behind the scenes for working his way through the technology, Carlotta and Matt who've brought some of this together, and thanks for you all for joining in. Thanks very much.